Congressman Bart Gordon, Democrat from Tennessee, thanks for sitting
Sure.
down with us. And I want to begin many years ago, 1985. You're elected to the Congress, you're sworn in as a freshman member, walking through the halls of Congress. Do you remember what you were thinking?
Dream come true. When I was a senior in high school, I decided that I wanted to be a member of Congress. And everything I did through college, law school, and after that was all geared toward running for Congress. And so to me, it was a great dream come true.
Did it meet your expectations in the time that you were in the House?
Well, let me tell you an early experience. When I first I wasn't even sworn in yet, went over to the floor, never been on the House floor before. And there was a gentleman that was sitting there. I can really, in my mind, I know exactly where he was sitting. So I went up and sat next to him and said, "Hi, I'm Bart Gordon." He didn't say anything. Just got elected. I'm from Tennessee. Still didn't say anything. So that was fine. I was still just looking around. And a little after that, someone came over, a staffer, and got him, and he teetered off, you know. And 2 days after that, we are electing our committee chairman. And the person's name was Mel Price. He had been the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and he was running again to be chairman of the Armed Services Committee. And he didn't know where he was. So it was a real shock to me. And so I joined some other folks, and we wound up beating him by one vote with a guy named Les Aspin, who was sort of a younger guy that was trying to make. So that was a bit of a shock to seniority and all those sorts of things, and I guess the traditions of the House.
So you worked with and served under five presidents and six speakers, including Tip O'Neill.
Correct.
How did you view the role of the speaker? And as a Democrat, how difficult was it for you to buck your own party?
Well, there's a variety of things there. Yes, I wasn't just a Democrat. I was a Democrat in a Republican seat. No, during that whole time, no Democrat ever carried it that ran for president, even Al Gore, and I succeeded Al. So I was always very sensitive, to what was going on. Uh, but the leadership, particularly Nancy Pelosi, recognized my situation, and they sort of knew that I would do the right thing if I had to at the end, But there really wasn't a lot of pressure in that regard.
One of the things as we talk to former members that comes up time and time again is the lack of civility that we're seeing in Congress today. As an outsider now looking at Congress as an institution and your experiences from 1985 through 2010, what are your thoughts? How is it today? What was it like when you were in?
Well, it was a different situation. When I was first elected, probably Tip O'Neill had a majority of well over 100. So there was really, it was do whatever you want to do because I got the votes here in terms of the Democrats. But in those, whatever, 20 years before, quite frankly, the Democrats, my observation, Democrats were never mean to the Republicans. They just didn't take them seriously. They didn't have to, they had the votes. And so you could understand that there was a Republican resentment that boiled up. And Newt Gingrich was the face of that. And Newt felt like for Republicans to get a fair say in Congress, that they had to burn it down, which was unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they were put in that position and unfortunate that he did that because that really lit the fuse of whatever the opposition did to you, I'm going to do it to them when I'm in the majority double. And so it had just ratcheted up since then. But in those days, there was no sleeping in your office. By and large, people came, in on a Monday and maybe left on a Sunday or their Tuesday afternoon, and they'd go home and work. And they found that they could spend more time with their families. The families was here because then they could just work when they were in the district. And so you had, people had or members, kids were in school together. going to church together. The spouses were interacting a lot. So there was much more camaraderie in those early and mid 80s. Um, and you guess you just spent more time with each other in committee meetings and on the floor.
What was Tip O'Neill like as the speaker?
He was great. I mean, he was just what he's the caricature that you would see, you know, sort of a big, joyous fella, slap you on the back. But again, he had a big majority. So he really, there was no really herding cats with him. Nancy Pelosi, on the other hand, had a very small majority. And she, of all the speakers that I served with, you could say what's the best, and best could be a variety of things. She was the most effective
Why?
because she knew her members. She knew how to put the coalitions together, let her chairman um, do work the will of the committees rather than she would micromanage some of the big issues, but otherwise she would have them bring it up. And with me, she just said, I was chairman of the Science Committee, bring me good legislation. And I'll give you an example of how she knew people. I don't remember what it was exactly, but there was a hard vote, for somebody like me in a Republican seat. I was sitting next to Mike Thompson. Remember this so well. And I know again where we were sitting, and we see Nancy coming up the aisle. And so Mike and I we were both trying to get to be invisible because we knew that she was looking for votes. And as she walked by, she didn't say anything to me because she knew I couldn't vote for that. But she looked at Mike and said, "Oh, Mikey, you can vote for that." And Mike looked over at me and said, "Busted." He knew that he had to do it. So she knew her members. She knew how to put things together, very strategic. And the other thing about Speaker Pelosi is, and I was in a lot of kind of leadership meetings, various things with her. Um, you know, she was very much of an institutional person, but she was very much of a lady. And when you were with her, she made you, by her just demeanor, want to be better. We were a bunch of rowdy guys, but nobody, was cursing. Nobody, really was arguing there. She just made that come out in you. She's a special person.
Did you ever cast a vote or sponsor a bill that you thought, boy, this is going to get me in trouble in a primary in the next election cycle?
Uh, yes, I was for home rule of the district. That wasn't a good, voted for a variety of things that you know, voted for or against things that could have gotten me in trouble, but didn't sponsor a lot of bills. I mean, I wasn't looking for trouble. If it found me, I would deal with it, but I wasn't out looking for trouble.
The other issue that we've been talking about, the way these districts are drawn up, how is it done in Tennessee, by the way, the congressional districts?
Partisan redistricting. And whoever's in charge, does it the way that best serves their members. An example was, which was really a shame, Jim Cooper, a wonderful, studious, member of Congress, represented Nashville. And Nashville basically a single district since Andrew Jackson. Um, and it was a Democratic area. And so the Republicans came in and cut Nashville, Davidson County, into three pieces, pulling it into a little bit into three different Republican districts so that they could beat Jim. And they already had an 8-2 majority. But they wanted to get one more, and it just butchered history and butchered, the capital city to do that.
So, what is the view of Bart Gordon when you look at the way these districts are drawn and how that affects how Congress operates day in and day out?
It's awful, and I wish that more states would take over uh, redistricting in a nonpartisan way. You've heard this before, but what happens is, um, uh, of the 435 members of Congress, whatever, 30 are really swing districts. So all the others are you're elected in the primary. And to be elected in the primary, whether you're a Democrat or Republicans, mean you have to be the extreme. And because it's the extremes turn out in those primaries. So you're really you're sending people uh, that had to be extreme to win the primary to come to Washington to be extreme. And those few more moderate ones in the swing districts, they're at the risk of the next election.
Because the problem then is, where is the incentive to cross the aisle if you are more worried about a primary than a general election, correct?
Yeah, well, my grandfather used to say the most important road in the county is the one in front of your house. And so, yes, the first job is to be reelected. And so, if you don't make it to the primary, then you don't go to the general.
When you first ran in 1984, do you remember how much money you raised and spent?
Yeah, well, that was two different things. I think I raised, which was, I thought, a lot of money at the time, probably $450,000. And then I mortgaged my house for everything they would give me for that last little bit of media. And that was another $25,000. So I was all in.
And when you ran for re-election the last time?
It was it was well over $1.5 million. And I was lucky that I never had a self-funder and I was never heavily targeted. So I had races, but I didn't have a lot of outside money come in. And because of that, then I didn't have to raise a lot of outside money, and the figures didn't get up, so crazy.
Because that in and of itself is another huge problem. Outside funding, Citizens United, and the amount of money it takes to run in competitive districts,
And the
especially high
time it
markets.
takes to do that away from from your real job.
So address all of that.
Well, I would like to see uh, some type of limits on outside spending, if necessary, to get around, constitutional barriers. Then I think even some matching funds in Congress. I'm for anything that I won't say hopefully reduces, but at least stabilizes the cost.
But here's the problem, as you know, and Citizens United is a great example, it's freedom of speech. And so if you restrict money, you're restricting free speech.
Well, that's what the court barely said, and I had a real argument with. Interestingly, I was giving a commencement at Rensselaer, and so was uh, Justice Scalia, and that was a 5-4 decision, and so he equated it that way. Um, uh, free speech and spending unlimited amount of money saying things that aren't true oftentimes. I don't think that equates, but one vote on the Supreme Court would change that.
As you look at Congress today, we are in a very different era with President Trump. Do you have any concerns that Congress is usurping its role as Article 1 of the Constitution?
Oh, Congress is completely, and not just this president, but the Congress for the last 2 or 3 presidents has acquiesced their authority
Why?
because they couldn't get their act together to do something. And because you generally, if you're going to pass legislation that's going to be, uh, going to stay over time, it's got to be bipartisan. So they couldn't reach the bipartisan decisions. So we all know what happens when there's a void. Presidents has stepped in with executive orders and everything. So yes, Congress has stepped away from its authority, and most members of Congress know that. Most members of Congress regret it, and most members of Congress think that they would have to take career-altering votes to change it.
So, if now former Congressman Bart Gordon had the authority to make some changes, whether it's a 2 versus 4 year term, the committee process and structure, the calendar, or other ways that Congress operates as an institution, what would those changes be?
Well, first, I would certainly want to have what we call regular order.
Which means what?
Regular order means that if you have a bill, it's sent to the committee of jurisdiction. The committee of jurisdiction then sends it to the subcommittee of jurisdiction, where they do hearings with staff and members that are knowledgeable in that area. They will then, at least what I did in my committee when I was chairman, we would try to, what I would call, get rid of the brush at the subcommittee level. Try to agree on amendments that could be, those that couldn't be. I didn't want them to vote them down. I just said, pass them on to the full committee. Give us a little more time to work on it. I had my sort of rule, not on the committee, but overall, was I never wanted to tell another member no. Now, if they came and asked me to do something, I could say, I can't do that, but what about this? What about that? Let's talk about it. And so if you go through the committee process, rather than just saying no, most things you can come to some type of a compromise, which I don't think is a bad word, or an agreement. And then at the end of the day, there are those areas that, that are just uncompromisable. You just have different views. So you take a vote. And if you're the chairman, you should have the votes and you win. But you've given the minority party the chance from all the way from, introducing the bill or amendment, subcommittee, full committee, to have their say, make their case. And again, my experience was when I did that, my Republican minority members were supportive of the bill. They were either 100% supportive or they were 90%, but they felt that they had their say, they were part of it. When we would go to the floor, and at that time, John Boehner was the minority leader. And the idea, if you're the minority leader, is try to stop the majority from passing anything. So you can go say, well, they didn't get anything done. So John would try to throw up barriers, but my Republicans would almost uniformly all support the bill because they were part of it. So going back to that type of regular order would be very beneficial. Getting away from Tuesday, Thursday sessions so that members had to spend more time with each other and their families, so that so much is done with personal relationships and trust. That would be, I think, very beneficial. Obviously, I would like to see another challenge to the Supreme Court 5-4 ruling on campaign finance, so that you don't have unlimited outside. And this was one thing with Scully and I. We got to this debate, and he said, well, it's not unlimited money. I said, yes, it is. I mean, there's no limit to the amount of outside money that can come in. So you can just be flooded. And I think, so there needs to be some type of reasonable constitutional limits. You don't, scream fire in a crowded theater. There are limits to freedom of speech. So there should be some limits for the good of the country for unlimited, outside, unreported money.
Let's talk about the media, because when you came to the House, we had 3 broadcast networks still dominant in the evening news coverage, and cable television still very much in its infancy. You left in 2010, 2011 with a plethora of social media sites, partisan cable channels from MSNBC to Fox News, and of course, podcasts and unlimited sources of news and information. How do you think all of that has affected our politics?
And it feeds in to the two things. It feeds into the partisan redistricting, to amplifies the extremes of each side. It has become a source of fundraising. So people are, because there's just no limits, folks are being extreme on these extreme media sources so that they then can raise money, from not unanimous, but sources they don't know all across the country, but just heard them on TV screaming about something one way or the other. It's a tough situation.
We're talking to Democratic Congress.
When I got here, and I can't remember, it wasn't maybe it was the fairness doctrine. I can't remember what it was, but that time the media, if they had a not reporting the news, but commentary, they had to give the other side equal time.
Fairness doctrine.
Fairness doctrine, yeah. And so Um, when the Fairness Doctrine was done away with, it was Katie bar the door.
We're talking to former Democratic Congressman Bart Gordon. So you mentioned earlier about compromise, and you're right. It is it's a hard word to use in Washington. And if you compromise, you're viewed as unfaithful to your party. Republicans would say
Yeah.
you're a rhino.
And our whole Constitution, the reason we have two branches of government was a compromise. The reason that we have, I have the House and the Senate. The whole our founding fathers didn't come in with a single idea for our Constitution. It was all a blend of multiple ideas and all compromised in a good spirit.
So how do you fix it? How do you change it? Is it fixable?
Well, until you fix the amount of money that comes in the Congress, till you maybe go back to a fairness doctrine, um, it's going to be very difficult to deal with. And the other thing is, you really have to have, and this is not a reflection on current, leadership, but you're really going to have some new leaders that don't have the scars of the past that can step up and make some hard choices. And hard choices are this. If you're in the majority, you know that your minority is trying to beat you every day. Um, but you're going to have to give them say in the process. Now, you may have to have some tough votes, maybe different things, but you've got to bring them in to the process. And that's why, as I say, maybe new leaders with less scars could do that.
But how would that work today in 2025 with Donald Trump in the White House and a narrow House majority, a narrow majority for the Senate Republicans? How would that work?
Well, the way that would work is you would hope that the Supreme Court would honor the two term uh, of a president, and you're going to have to be post-Trump. A Republican now, and I feel for them, the vast majority of Republicans cannot win uh, a succeed in Congress with Trump's megaphone and Elon Musk money. I have great sympathy for them.
So we talked about your first days
And
in
they're
the.
unhappy. Everybody's unhappy. Nobody, nobody in Congress is happy now.
Well, is this any way to run a government?
No, it's not. And you see what you're getting.
So I asked about your first days in Congress. You left in 2010, 2011. How did it change the institution?
Oh, then, well, it changed by all the things we've been talking about. It became much more partisan, much more money, campaign driven. Uh, um, there's still some cordiality between members of different parties that maybe served on the same committee, sat next to each other. There's nothing like sitting down next to somebody on the floor in a committee, for oftentimes, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, seeing each other grow old, talking about your grandkids. It, 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 there is some of that, but it's not widespread.
So finally, is it as bad as it seems or better than we think right now, the way it's working in the House, among the members in the chamber?
I got a call a while back from a friend at home, and she was exasperated by some things that are going on. She said, "Is it as bad as what I see on TV?" I said, "No, it's worse."
Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here.